With a Crawdads Sing out in theaters now, a new film based on the best-selling novel under the same title, written by Delia Owens. The film stars Daisy Edgar-Jones in the lead role and is a mixture of thriller, crime drama, and romance. The story is fairly faithful to the book and initially takes place, like in the book, in two separate timelines until at some point they converge. The first one takes place in 1969 and a young man's body is found outside of a small North Carolina town in the marsh. It looks like it could have been an accident where he fell off an observation tower, but the authorities also seriously consider the possibility of foul play, of murder, and they end up arresting Kaya, a 23-year-old woman living alone in the marsh, known in town as the Marsh Girl. And then, sort of through her narration, we go into the past, into these extended flashbacks, starting in the early 1950s, with her growing up in the marsh as a little girl, initially with her family, then with her mom, and then siblings leaving one by one with just her dad, and finally completely alone, struggling to stay afloat by selling oysters and other valuable things she can find, learning slowly about nature, fascinated by the wildlife. And then as she becomes a young woman, also we watch her establish relations with two boys, one of whom is Chase, the one that ends up getting murdered. So the way it works is, as the trial goes on, we learn through the flashbacks the entire story of her life leading up to that point and what actually happened. And then, you know, the flashbacks catch up to the present day storyline and then it goes from there. Now, I've read the book pretty much just before seeing the film, and I thought it was alright. I thought it was okay. Well, I expected it to focus more on the crime drama, and it didn't, and I was slightly disappointed by it. I thought it actually delivered strongly on two other things: the exploration of loneliness and vulnerability of Kaya as a character, and the setting of the wild marshes of North Carolina. And I thought that the movie could expand on that last aspect, especially show, you know, visually the beauty of the location, and thus be even better than the book. But instead, I think that the film ends up being inferior to the book, and it ends up being rather middling, and unexciting. I mean, it's hard to put my finger on it exactly what the reasons are. Maybe it's because I was so fresh off the book, and you know, therefore knew what was going to happen at any given time. But I sort of struggled to care, to get caught up in the narrative, to get emotionally invested in the characters and situations. I think Daisy Edgar-Jones does a fine job with the lead, with the lead role. But I do think that we spend perhaps too little time with just Kaya, exploring that lonely life, and instead, you know, too much attention is given to the relationships with both boys. In fact, I was shocked to see just how many scenes there were of them, you know, kissing, going to bed, other types of physical attention, because the book was not like that. I mean, there was that aspect, of course, but it was sort of to the side, and the emotional parts of both relationships were far more important, which I don't think that the film translates very well. Other than that, I mean, it's very faithful to the book, as I said, technically. It doesn't really omit any crucial stuff, but it just has different pacing. In the book, the whole growing up in the marsh thing and Kaya's childhood is really allowed a lot of room to breathe, whereas in the film, it's kind of quickly glossed over and we have to move to cover all the important events of the, you know, investigation and the crime and so on. I did like the look of the film and the atmosphere of the marsh, even though I would have liked, again, to spend more time with that aspect as well. As it stands, I mean, you can kind of see I'm struggling to explain this very well, but, you know, because there isn't anything obviously wrong with the film. It's not terrible in any way, but somehow it's just not riveting either. In fact, it's kind of boring at times and forgettable, if I'm being honest, which really is the biggest sin that the movie can commit. And a shame, really, because the components are seemingly all there, and it's just less than the sum of its parts.